second day of your international seminar. I'm very happy to be part of this deliberations, which basically try to investigate beyond the written word and also the frontiers of English literature. I'm extremely grateful to the Department of English, Xaviers College, Aluva, and also to Sree Sankara College, Kalady, for extending this invitation towards me and allowing me to be here. I think I wanted to be with one of the seminars last year, and I remember talking to Dr. Mini about that, but unfortunately I couldn't turn up at that. But she said one word, definitely come. So somehow, after 1 year, maybe this has materialized. So beyond the written word, there are certain things that happen. So, but then, especially when I being part of this gathering, I would like to place on record my gratitude to the principal, Professor Dr. Menon, and Principal Dr. Preeti, and also all teachers of both the departments, both the HODs, Dr. Vinod sir and Dr. Mini, and also the coordinators, Dr. Saumi, Sree ma'am, Manu sir, and all other friends, Dr. Lima and all. I thought I could see some of faces, but maybe they're all busy, they're on schedules. So it's very happy to be, I'm very happy to be here. Don't worry, I won't go beyond 12:30 because I have a train to catch at 1 o'clock, so I can't be late. So I know that sometimes this is a very difficult exercise, but specific choice of Edward Said at this particular juncture has been very important. So I'd like to just rush through introductory remarks on some of his key texts and its relevance for the current times. And I understand that there are students and research scholars and teachers here. So we will just be going through some of his key texts very fast. It has been 20 years since Said has passed away, from 1935 to 2003. And Edward Said's legacy has to be revisited at this particular juncture in the context of the contemporary events that are happening around us. So I would like to start with this very phenomenal book, the 1978 book Orientalism, which inaugurated a paradigm shift in post-colonial critical practices. And actually the discursive world of the phenomenon of Orientalism tried to make a difference between the you and me, between the East and the West, an ontological and epistemological difference. But it was not just an academic discourse, it was something, a corporate institution that enabled the West to have authority over the Orient. So all the kinds of binaries that were basically created, like near, far, known, unknown, visited, unvisited, conquered, unconquered, familiar, novel, watcher, watched, etc., were all parts of these binaries that were created as part of Orientalism. Now, I basically have a doubt whether many of us have really read this book in complete. At least the introduction we must have been familiar. But I would suggest that every research scholar should read this one book of Said, because it will teach you how to arrange your chapters for PhD. So this will be a very practically good exercise to just read through how Said arranges his chapters. So this has been a very good methodological exercise. We had in MG University a little of Edward Said in the UG and PG and all, but I think we should have more of Said at this particular critical juncture. Now, this is the second book that I am just trying to bring in focus, that is Culture and Imperialism. We have essays from this which we study in our syllabus, but this 1993 book was trying to talk about the struggle over geography, where Said was basically trying to call for a more nuanced reading of the works of art, especially the novel, where you have to pay attention to national, international, and historical context instead of just focusing on their internal coherence. So why Edward Said is important is because instead of just looking into the internal coherences of text, all kinds of new critical paradigms, one should really move out of the text, so beyond the written word, into the historical, national, and international context. So you have a lot of examples from this book which try to talk about Western novels, English literature, English novels basically, which try to create a very big palimpsest that was helpful for the empire. So we have a lot of texts like, Mansfield Park, for example, which would basically try to, we put it in syllabus without understanding that maybe the trans would not have been possible without the slave trade, sugar, and the colonial planter class. So the slave trade, which was abolished only in 1830s, was the reason for why you had a metropolitan center of London existing and creating a wealthy class there. But in this text, Said would basically try to talk of one more thing, that is, how do you look at transient individuals? For example, how do you look at servants? How do you look at working class people? How do you look at migrant laborers? And how do they contribute to the main upper class British society? So Said will articulate something called the contrapuntal reading, which he basically tries to take from music, which is a metaphor for music. And what he tried to do was to change the focus from the center to the margins. But in fact, he was basically trying to peripheralize the center rather than bringing the margins to the center. So how do you contest a center using the margin? Now, one of his basic arguments would be, rather than what to read, how to read. And Mary Louise Pratt would call Said's methodology as a chronology, where you try to read the past through the present. So these texts, when you try to bring literature and all, when you look at them as these realms of pleasure, Said would try to talk of the realms of pain behind these realms of pleasure. So he would also basically try to talk as texts as protein things which are tied to circumstances, to politics, large and small, and these require attention and criticism. This text, covering Islam, first appeared in 1981. Maybe many of us are not familiar with this text, but why this text is important is, it was Said's argument that said that there was no direct correspondence between Islam and the common Western usage and the enormously varied life that goes on within the world of Islam. The Western discourse would try to create a very monolithic, very homogeneous kind of Islam and try to denigrate it and demonize it. So, this text is a third in the series. The first book is Orientalism, the second book is the question of Palestine, and the third book is covering Islam. So, unless one has to read all these three books together to understand what Said would try to create as an argument. This book, I find it very interesting, and it is actually a 1983 book, but it contains essays. In fact, Said's strong point was essay, which many of us really don't like to teach in class. We like poetry, we like short stories. When essays come, we say, okay, someone else. And somebody who teaches one essay will be sometimes dedicated to teach that for maybe 10 years, 12 years. Suppose you teach Derrida structure sentences, and no one else will ever teach that. You suddenly become the expert. So, but this is why you have to go back to Said, the form of the essay, how he writes and how he argues his arguments. Now, this one, why I have put this in a slide is, this tries to show the shift in American literary theory during the late 70s, which receded into something called textuality, which I think you had a session yesterday on. Now, when you really recede into textuality with the apostles like Derrida and Foucault and all, Said was not happy with the kind of hermetically sealed interpretations and airy abstractions that were completely associated with textuality per se. Now, if you look at textuality in some other way, fine, but if you're talking of a kind of sealed experience, Said was definitely against it. So, sometimes you ask a very crude question: what is the use of reading Derrida when blood enters the living room? So, how does Derrida help you when blood enters the living room? So, this is one question. But the answer is not that, because the question is slightly wrong. How do you address this question? Derrida is useful because he helped us in founding certain kind of decentric discourses, which became anti-foundation. So, all kinds of decentric discourses, definitely fine. But if they are only area abstractions, that is where Said has a problem with it. Now, when Orientalism came out, Said was first called as a Foucauldian. And then Said himself has problems with Foucault. In Kerala and all, from what I understood, Said was hailed as a Marxist first. But slowly when people started reading him, they understood that he was talking against that also. So this is a whole problem. You read only the introduction, you don't read the chapter 1. So how does Said articulate these things? Then this text, I'm bringing it into foreground once again, the question of Palestine. This was written in 77 and 70. This was one of the first books that put before the Western audience Palestinian position, perspective to the simmering Palestinian problem. Now, every time you speak of something Palestinian, the label that comes accompanying is the label of terrorism. Now, this was a book that pleaded for the case before a world which is terribly biased towards the Zionist position on Israel. Now, this is a Q&A, just a question for the audience. For those who know him, please don't answer. Those who are hearing him for the first time, what do you think Edward Said, who do you think Edward Said is? Is he a Muslim? Is he an Arab? Is he a Palestinian? What is his religion? Any idea?
He's a Christian.
Yeah, what kind of Christian?
Muslim.
Okay, fine. So that is, this was one big problem that, thank you for that. This was one big problem with his name. You know, Edward Said, one could not, he himself talks about, I think I'll come back to that. His name was a burden to him, where he had to have a British name at the first half and then his Arab name at the second half. And many of the people listening to the term Said would basically say he is an Arab Muslim, but he basically says a Palestinian Christian. Now, how many of us acknowledge the fact of Palestinian Christian minority out there in that geography? Now, there was a very curious incident. Even Christopher Hitchens, a Christopher Norris, was translating one of Said's an article where he translated the name Edward Said not as Said but Edward said when he wrote it in Hebrew, because both of them, Hebrew and Arabic, seems to have similar scripts. Not because he didn't know, but sounding the word Said in Hebrew language would become very discomforting. So this is the politics that sometimes happens. So even when one does not want to articulate a name like Said. Now yesterday I think Said's daughter was talking online, Najla Said. She was telling that my name has become a burden. She is living in the US, and there are all parades for Israel's Foundation Day is paraded, but you have nothing for the Palestinians. So Najla says this also. She has a book, in fact, about her growing up also. Now, this book I just put in for those who want to know the gist of the problem. The Politics of Dispossession, 1994, is a collection of Said's political essays. Now, in World War I, what happened? Britain promises independence to the Palestinian Arabs, and they say that if you join the Allies against the Ottoman Empire, we'll give Palestine to you. But at the same time, Palestine is being promised to the Zionists also, both of them together. Now, in 1917, when the Balfour Declaration was made, this is very interesting. If you really read the declaration, it's these letters actually. This letter, the nation or homeland for Jews were promised in Palestine, not the whole of Palestine. So it was supposed to be inside, but the in was, the word is sometimes elided, and the whole of Palestine was given. Not in the whole. Look at this, some of the statistics. 90% population was Arab population. And by 1948, you have only 30% Jewish population despite the continuous Jewish immigration. At the time, the Zionist settlers had only 6% land. But despite this, 55% of Palestine is being allotted and partitioned to a Jewish state. So, one of the most complex geographical histories is the Palestinian problem. So, I would urge all of you to really read at least a little of this. I'm sure it's going to be difficult to make head and tail out of that. But then, the question of land is the question of Palestine. That is what I would like to stress. It is not any other question, it is a question of land. Now, you have the Oslo peace process all coming up, and Said was articulating one sentence, which for which I've taken this. It is impossible to draw lines between people whose cultures, histories, and geographical proximity cannot be separate. Now, this is the problem that you really face. You are trying to separate people who have very intertwined cultures, very intertwined histories, very intertwined geographical proximities. So, this task has to be done very carefully. And this is a very beautiful book. Those who have seen this book, After the Last Sky, Palestinian Lives, 1986. this basically has photographs of Palestinian lives, which is documented in very intimate particulars, and it has a famous epigraph from Mahmoud Darwish's poem, "Where should we go after the last frontiers? Where should the birds fly after the last sky?" So that is from where the title of the book is actually taken. There is a big politics behind this because Palestinian people's photographs were not allowed to be hung in events halls and all. So Saeed and Jane were collaborate and say, okay, then let's do a book. If they're not allowing us to put our photographs, then we'll do a book. So he was a Swiss photographer actually. I'll come to one of his photographs also later. Now look at this. Culture and Resistance is another book. Again, these are conversations between Saeed and David Bassamian. Now, Saeed always wanted maps to be published because that is very hard to publish a map of Israel-Palestine, especially in North America. Saeed was called the professor of terror. The FBI had a 238-page file on Saeed himself. His campus, his office was the only one other than the president of Columbia University, which is bulletproof, which had a security bell ringing directly, basically. So he was under constant surveillance. And he does this, he publishes maps, 13 maps in this book, in the appendix, to tell the story of conquest more eloquently than words can. So maps are very important in this context. So this is a little old, don't just disregard the present, but this gives you a slight idea of what happens. So Jewish settlements are shown in white, the Palestinian land is shown in green. So in 1947, this is what happens. The partition plan, you have more of the white color coming up, if you see. And 49 to 67, you see, suddenly the white land, the Israeli Jewish settlements are increasing. And now these small dots which you have are only what you call Gaza Strip and West Bank. And if you really look at West Bank, it is not a continuous area. So it is totally broken, centered. From one place to another, you have to go through Israeli checkpost. And the Gaza Strip, if you really look, it's just 41 kilometers long, 5 kilometers wide, 365 square kilometers total. It's a very small area. I would like to now move into something called Saeed's interest in music, which is rarely talked about. So this were his 1989 Welleck Library lectures at the University of California. They were compiled together as musical elaborations. Now Saeed basically tries to talk about Western classical music here, and he has 3 chapters in this book. One is called Performance as an Extreme Occasion. The other one is called On the Transgressive Elements in Music, and Melody, Solitude and Affirmation. So if you look into Saeed's criticism, basically you have a lot of musical terms which are being used as critical concepts. So the first term we mentioned, that is contrapuntal weighting, which comes from counterpoint. You have the term polyphony coming up, basically. So what he basically had to, looking at counterpoint, for in music, it's very interesting. Rather than having a very single melody line, you have these separate voices which have their own independence, but not just that. They coalesce together and create a different sound when played together or sung together, which will not be possible if they are sung only alone. So that is what he calls some kind of physics actually, the interference that happens and creates a new reality. So this is what he basically tries to put through. So he was basically a music critic also. For 20 years he was continuously writing in journals about music. Now he would basically try to have a vision of music not as a specialist, but as an amateur. He was basically trying to talk about one should not become a virtuoso. The specialist is somebody who you should be afraid of. The amateur is the only person who can make something called the voyage in. If you become a specialist, you are cornered. You have to be an amateur to crisscross boundaries. So that is why one word which Saeed always like was transgression. I think the theological sense sometimes uses transgression is sin, but transgression is actually crossing over, border crossing. So what you call frontiers and all, or beyond the written word. This transgression is needed to connect with the other. So that is the whole institution of what Orientalism tried to say, or existentialism tried to call the other. Basically, unless you make the sin called transgression, you are not able to connect with the other. Now, he would also talk about the concert hall, etc. But there are certain experiences which Sai also tries to talk, where he talks about his encounter with Oriental music. Yeah, Oriental music, he talks about a particular singer, Kaladu, basically. Instead of trying to finish a song, the singer would try to keep on repeating the same phrase again and again. So these variations, expositions of the same theme again and again and again. Now, what was this? So instead of this Western temporality, which was basically always in a hurry to complete any projects, you have to stand and examine the same thing again and again and again. So this is, I'll come to it also. If you look into a Western sonata form also, you have something called recapitulation. The first theme is played once again at the end, but this time when you hear it, it becomes so different. Because there is a mid passage which comes in and then suddenly the context changes. So this is music's importance was very profound inside, and he has given us with the this is another book which he was writing and he passed away on 25th September 2003. This is on late style. This talks about something called lateness. How this is very interesting. You know why? Somebody comes to class late, you are so worried about the student. Why are you late? But Sahib said lateness is a very important critical concept. So if students are here from tomorrow onwards, maybe you could say no. Edward Said was talking on late style, so I am trying to invite that late style into it. But what is lateness? So if you look at it like text like Tempest for Shakespeare, you call it late place or something like that. But the problem is Shakespeare tries to create some kind of resolution at the end. Sai then would talk of late style in music and all, not like that. It was unresolved contradictions. So there are certain things you should not be in a hurry to say put a full stop and end it. There are unresolved. Now this actually happens when a musician, when a writer, and an artist is actually faced with a fear of death, which comes in Beethoven basically, which comes in Adorno basically, and which also comes in Said. He was diagnosed with leukemia. And suddenly then this book starts happening. This also happens when he starts writing this autobiographical piece out of place. So bibliotherapy as you try to call it. But music for him was also therapy basically. So the death of the artist. Today you have new fields called death studies, funeral studies. Yesterday I looked up something called thanatology. So thanatology. So death is becoming a very important subject. But the death of the artist gets into the works all the same. This is a very huge book actually. If you get a chance to look at it, please buy this book. It has 45 essays on music written by Said from 1983 to 2003 when he served as a music critic. Now, the foreword of this book is written by Daniel Barenboim, which we will come to him later. But he says that Said is one of those rare people who sought connections between different and seemingly disparate disciplines. So, to cross over the frontiers, parallels between ideas, topics, cultures, etc. Now, in this book, he has an essay called Feminism and Music. One of the very rare essays he's written. Said is criticized for never talking about gender question. But there is a small essay in this called Feminism and Music, where he tries to talk about women composers. And he also has this curious question: is there a feminine kind of music? Because some people say Beethoven is so masculine and Bach is so feminine. So how does that happen? But then, what about what happens when the same thing is played by a woman, a female instrumentalist or a composer? What happens? And he doesn't really give an answer to that actually. So this was one question he very blindly bypassed. Okay, so this is a picture from Jane Moore, where one of very rare pictures where you see Edward Said playing the piano. He was a pianist of concert level proficiency. Okay, so this is a 1983 picture. Whenever he felt ill, whenever he felt distressed, he went to the piano basically. And he was trained in Western classical music from his young days itself. Now this book is a very small book. This is also conversation between two very important intellectuals. It is titled Parallels and Paradoxes, Explorations in Music and Society. This is it shows conversations between Edward Said and Daniel Barenboim. Now Barenboim is actually an Argentine Israeli conductor, and Saeed, as you know, is a Palestinian American. So how can these Israeli and Palestinian come together and converse? This is a very good example. These dialogues show very fervent, creative minds engaged in scintillating discussions about art, history, literature, politics, and life. One nice observation which I would like to put forward is, what is the role of music education? So we don't have music in our syllabus. We've thrown it out from our regular colleges and put it only for music colleges. So what does music education actually do? Why should music education be? So Barber actually takes, right? It brings a very big balance between your head, your heart, and your stomach. Because if you have to sing, the air has to come from there, right? So this balance has to be there, and this has to be taught when you are from very young itself. But not just that. How do you look into a symphony orchestra? If you learn to play in an orchestra, you need to learn two things first. First thing is, you should not just play your own notes, you should learn to listen to others. So music teaches you to listen to others. So I'm always worried, when teachers give lectures, how musical they are, because this kind of monologues that happen. So whatever the small sound that has been happening at the end of the hall, at the corner, that small voice, in a symphony orchestra, this is very important. That smallest voice. Suppose a small instrument, we call a flute size, you say, oh, this big double bass is there, I'm not going to play my note, I am unimportant. Suddenly the whole music taught us. The second thing is, it also teaches you how to live in a democratic society. There are times when you have to lead, and there are times where you have to withdraw. So certain points you have to take the lead, but certain points you have to withdraw and let others take the lead. So democratic, very big democratic institution, that is how Said tries to talk of the symphony. I think I'll just talk about this and play a video for you. This is a very important institution that Said founded. This is called the West Eastern Diamond Orchestra. This orchestra is very special because it is composed of Israeli and Arab musicians together playing, overcoming the political divide between Israel and Palestine. This is a way of playfully overcoming this political divide. Now, this orchestra was founded in 1999. And it is one of the world's top orchestras. It had 78 members at the beginning. Founded by Daniel Barenboim, who is comes from the Jewish family, and this Edward Said, who passed away in 2003. This was used as a dialogue between two cultures, Israeli and Arab musicians. This was thought to be an impossible project, but it is still continuing even now to understand each other exceptionally well. This was called as a peace orchestra, but it was not brought to become a political project, it was thought to become a humanistic project. So certain questions are put at the end. How do Israeli and Arab musicians get along with each other? So what happens when they come together? How does the orchestra work as a team? What role music can play in today's world? For Barenboim, the answer is clear. Music is an art form that overcomes divides and in which people from hostile nations can create something together. This is just 8 of those members. This is a program actually, Equal in Music, and concert master is Michael Barenboim. And the United Nations had designated this orchestra in 2016 as a global advocate for cultural understanding. When people listen to each other, both musically and in all other ways, great results can be achieved. Let me see whether I can play this.
Strange though it may seem, it is culture generally and music in particular that provide an alternative model for the conflict of identities. My friend Daniel Barenboim and I have chosen this course for humanistic rather than political reasons, on the assumption that ignorance is not a strategy for sustainable survival. Discipline and dedication have provided us with the motor to bring our communities together in concert, without illusion and without abandoning our principles. What is so heartening is how many young people have responded, and how even in this most difficult time, young Palestinians have chosen to study music, learn an instrument, practice their art. Who knows how far we will go and who's not?
So that is Edward Said and Daniel Barenboim. I'll just play one more piece for you.
Music is a language that doesn't have any border, and you can communicate feelings, and you can also speak together through music, or to play music together, to be together, to love each other, to be friends, and doesn't matter which nationality, doesn't matter Palestinian, Israeli, Syrian, even it doesn't matter. Humanity should be on top of everything.
When you play music, you play, but you also have to listen to the others, otherwise you can't play together. It's kind of showing an alternative way of thinking for the Middle Eastern region, which is not based on arms, bombs, war, and conflict, but based on understanding and on dialogue and on listening to the other. That's very important.
Yeah, so we now move on to another text. This is his memoir titled Out of Place, 1999, which recounts the story of his boyhood in detail. You used to have one chapter from this in the UG syllabus earlier. Interestingly, the title itself shows the predicament that Said and people like him had to face, the paradoxes of identity that he had to traverse through the early years of his life, the oddity of his English name Edward yoked to the unmistakably Arabic Said. Now, this is a largely widely read book of Said. It actually combines his lectures, the BBC lectures in 1993, where he tries to talk of the role of the intellectual. And one first thing is to speak truth to power. So the intellectual is not like a Robinson Crusoe who tries to colonize this tiny island, but more like a Marco Polo who travels constantly with a sense of the marvelous and remains a provisional guest, not a freeloader, conqueror or raider. And as I tried to tell you, whenever he tried to remark on the Middle East, Palestinian Israeli relationships, the FBI had 238 pages filed on him, and his office bulletproof and was restricted to campus security. Now, this is also a very important book which has more than 46 essays. So at least now if you count how many essays you've written throughout this. But let me tell you, I have only put in less than half of the works and that side as well. There was one book because you have maybe 200 slides it will run if you put each book. So this much this man has written, and you don't have somebody writing this much these days maybe. Now on various topics, but the concept of exile was what was very important. Where he tried to also talk of Eric Orbach's Mimesis, which interestingly was written when he was exiled into Istanbul, and he was talking of the representations of reality in Western literature sitting in the Orient. So sometimes exile is good for a very creative purpose in that sense. But Said, when he went to America, he also faced a very big criticism. So the question is, isn't there a difference between a forced exile and your own planned immigration? So how do you look at this concept? So because he was part of the Western Academy, all kinds of post-colonial privileging questions were there. You're sitting there and talking of these people. But I think, of course, as theoretical, you can put all those arguments. But the contribution of Said is so immense that one should not ignore. There is this poem by Amisis as Notebook of a Return to the Native Land, which states a vision of integration, which is what I would like to put forward. Said would always talk of integration. No race possesses the monopoly of beauty, of intelligence, of force, and there is a place for all at the rendezvous of victory. So this is the same question, Palestinian question. If you really ask, what is the future? Said would basically talk of a joint future where you listen together and sit together. And maybe he was actually he had two positions. First, he talked of the one nation theory. Then he had to submit to in 1988 the two nation theory because of the peace talks and all that came after the Intifada basically. But then later he said this is wrong. You cannot separate them into two different people. You have to make them together. You have to bring them together, which is what is. So I would also like to point out one thing. The description of Palestinians by Israeli press and diplomacy, and all. Basically, they don't even give credibility to the existence of Palestinians as humans. They either call them as cockroaches or vermin or tool-like beasts. And the recent comment made by the Israeli Foreign Minister was, after October 7, was, we are fighting human animals. This comment gives you legitimacy to do all these things. That's what wrong. So this is not a new thing. That's what I'm trying to do. 1948 onwards, this kind of denigration has been continuous in terms of vocabulary. So that is why the written word, the spoken word, all becomes very powerful. One word, one adjective is a reason, a legitimacy to all the crimes that you commit. And this is a site actually trying to throw a stone at the Israeli border. If you look at it, maybe now we don't understand how serious this became, because he was suddenly talked as a professor of violence and he had to face a lot of death threats. But actually what really happened is when he went to visit Lebanon, there were a lot of people when the border was open simply throwing pebbles. So he just took a pebble and threw. That was actually what really happened. But this was photographed and this became a very iconic moment, and he was celebrated as, of course, resistance leader, but he also has to face death threats because of the small act. Then we just come to rush through certain statistics. This is 4 days old actually. This is not the exact count now. But then, if you look at this, at least 29,000 people have been killed, but an injured 70,000 people, Palestinians have been injured. There is a statistic which is missing here, which I would like to point attention. The number of people who are under the rubble, 7,000, 8,000 people, that is the statistics. That doesn't happen. Now, look at this. This is an interactive Gaza map, which was issued by the IDF. It splits this whole strip into hundreds of zones. And the IDF on December 1, 2023 said it will be used to notify Palestinian civilians of active combat zones. So they will tell you which zone has combat, which zone is safe you can go. But the interesting thing was, how this was given. This was given via, I'll show you the next slide. If you look down, this was actually given via a QR code. There is no electricity there, so there is no internet there. So you have to scan the QR code and then understand which is the zone that is safe and then go. Now, why I put this is you have 1.1 million people who left from northern Gaza. So you can see there's 4 divisions of Gaza, so basically North Gaza, then you have Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunus and Rafah, now where all these people are in the Rafah portion basically. And in fact, they've been cornered in this. Gaza is told to be the world's largest open air prison. The largest unemployment rates, people have no work, no job. No food. They have been thriving on subsistence diet, 16 years. This one, as 15 February, the number of IDPs, internally displaced persons, were 1.7 million. Over 75% of the population have been displaced. So they had to run from the northern end to the southern end. And this is a crime against humanity and violation. And this has been a very large humanitarian crisis that we're facing. And it is the largest displacement of Palestinians in the past 75 years. And it is described as the second Nakba. In 1948, the first dispossession took place, is told as the first Nakba. And 7 lakhs to 8 lakh people were displaced. But now look, you have 1.7 to 2.2. Hindu estimates cited actually 2.2. So maybe 2 million people are being displaced. But I would like to draw your attention to the last paragraph. If you have missed this piece of news, please go back, check Wikipedia, that's my suggestion. This first evacuation order on 13th October 2023 was described as genocidal by Adila Hassim SC in her speech to the International Court of Justice in January 2024. There is a case pending in the International Court of Justice. It is South Africa versus Israel. So South Africa is the first country which has called this Israel's crime as genocide, and they have taken it to the International Court of Justice. South Africa's whole transcript, 82 pages, is available free on the Wikipedia. Please take a look at it, the arguments, because this comes under something called the application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip. So this case is there pending there. And how does the situation of Palestinians not become genocide is what Israel is trying to argue. In the broader context of Israel towards Palestinians, three important things you have to do. It has been a 75-year apartheid. It has been a 56-year occupation. It has been a 16-year blockade of the strip. So this is the real situation of these people. Okay, this is open to the audience. This represents a very famous, this is not the exact painting, this is a famous war painting which is merged into the Palestinian crisis. Which is this war painting? Yeah, correct. Guernica, any idea which year? Guernica, which year? Just a rough. Which world? Okay, 1937 actually. But which country is Guernica? Yeah, Spain, correct. That is it. Now, why this is important? The first Western country to openly say, to state against Israel genocide on Palestine was Spain, and this took place on December 2023. And why should a Western country like Spain stand with Palestine? Any idea? Now, what was the whole experience of Guernica? Okay, who's paying? Yeah, this is for students. Teachers, please forgive me because they did some work. Otherwise, they do. Okay, whose painting is Guernica? Now open to all. This is why we should read side. No, close reading should take place. Guernica is a painting by? Yeah, Picasso, correct. Now, 1937, April 26, what really happened? The market was actually bombed. What is the purpose of the bombing is also more interesting. The very same square where this bombing took place, this demonstration is being taking place. So, look at this. Color of the flags, not issue. Humans were forming this color actually. Okay. So, next I just winding up. Any idea who this person is? Why I put this? Because Kerala Media Academy gave an award as a Media Person of the Year award to this person. He is called Wael Al-Dawud. His wife, his two children and grandchild were killed in the bombing of Gaza by Israel. He is a journalist. He is still continuing to report even after that. It's one son was just killed 1 month back. So he has lost his complete family and he is still continuing to report. This is a famous point that has come up. Rifat Alawi, I'll just read that point. If I must die, you must live. To tell my story, to sell my things. To buy a piece of cloth and some strings. Make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a place, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment, an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a story. Any idea who this poet is? He's an English professor, only 44 years old. He was killed in the Israeli airstrike in December. Okay, this particular poem has been translated into 40 languages so far. It has been translated into Malayalam also by Dr. Farouk of Emerson College. So at least some of you must have read it. It is available last month it came out. So this, even if you be a professor of English literature, the airstrike will not spare you. Okay, so this is where art stands. Okay, I think this point will continue. We should put it in literature and human rights, basically. Then this is concluding with this slide from Richard Falk, gave an Edward Said Memorial Lecture in November after the October 7. And this is stating Edward Said's contribution, why you should be revisiting his legacy. Edward came to possess one of the few keys that, if properly turned decades ago, might have avoided much of the ensuing misery for both peoples, allowing Jews and Arabs, despite the historic missteps, to learn to live together peacefully and justly, rather than engage in what has become macabre death dance. Edward's humanistic vision of what should and could have been now seems as remote as the most distant star in the galaxy. Now, 20 years back, if Edward said suggestions were followed 20 or 30 years back, maybe the prices would not have exaggerated so much. So I'd like to conclude with these words. In a world where the ideals of truth, peace, compassion, and harmonious justice seem to be led and threatened towards extinction as the days roll by, science fiction must essentially offer us hope and prosperity. It challenges us to go forward, just as Ahim says, holding hand in hand, building new bridges, crossing all barriers, climbing all stiles, breaking all fences, walking distant miles, eagerly awaiting the break of dawn and the spread of sunshine. So thank you for your patient listening. And I would also like to place on record gratitude to Dr. Archana Shankar for her presence here. I'm very happy to see her. So thank you once again, Dr. Savi and Dr. for inviting me. Thank you.